Buenos dias, buenos dias, buenos dias. Happy Wednesday, Wisdom Wednesday. Today, I want to share and talk a little bit about defining my enemies or realizing who was my enemy compared to who I thought were my enemies growing up. You know, growing up in a neighborhood full of friends and a lot of illegal activities and just a criminal lifestyle, I was raised to taught that there will be friends and there will be enemies, right? From how they shared it to me and how they taught me, right? There's always an enemy of our neighborhood. There's always a group of adversary to our area. So that's the way how I grew up in a neighborhood in Hawaii, knowing that there is enemies. So eventually I always carried that mentality as I got older, as a young teen. Anyone that would eventually that do me dirty is considered an enemy. Someone that I don't like or disrespected me is an enemy. And over the years, so I grew up with a lot of friends and a lot of enemies. And enemies sometimes that I always thought that there could be a point where either they can hurt me or I can hurt them. It depends on the situation, right? So, and even in the media, growing up, the media always painted this narrative to tell or share with me who was America's enemy, so made me feel who was my enemy. So like I remember, put it like this before I go into my personal enemies or my experience, right? I remember when 9/11 happened, and when the plane crashes into the twin tower in the city of New York, right? And I remember I was in school. I was either a junior or a senior or something like that. I think I was a senior. And we sat down, and I remember the teachers sat us down, and we all had to watch the news, what was going on, and I just remember that while we was watching the news, the media was painting this picture, like literally telling us that these terrorists, which was Muslims, which they said was Muslims, right? I'm gonna say it because I don't know what really happened to this day because it's a big conspiracy. But they painted this narrative that the Muslims hijacked the plane and were under attack and whatever's. But the way that they shared it, they made it seem like all Muslims was the enemy of our country. So made us feel like that any Muslim I see or know, that's the enemy. That we had to keep our guard up. We had to be observant towards them. And at that time, in Vegas, we didn't see that much of many Muslims. Like I barely knew any Muslims until I went to prison. So I end up in prison, right? I just always remember that I felt like Muslims was the enemies. People of Arab countries is the enemy of USA, and I always felt that they're terrorists, and wherever they are, we have to be careful. So that was another way that a narrative was painted to me of an enemy. So now I end up in prison, and I'm friends with a lot of Muslims, and I start realizing that no, Muslims was just people from a different country, a different religion. So eventually I became a lot good friends with them. And that narrative that I seen in the media was eventually uh, got me to think that was wrong, and how they painted it and how they try to brainwash us and how to think of who's our enemy. So I got that out the way, and I became good friends with a lot of Muslims. And I got a lot of stories with Muslims in prisons and how I respect them, and I have highly uh, admiration for them for their faith and the way they walk in their beliefs. Right? I might not agree on their faith, but I have deep respect for all Muslims, especially the ones that is sincere and is very take their religious very seriously. So now I grew in Christ and I started going deeper into my faith, and I started learning the wisdom of Jesus Christ and being blessed from his word of understanding of enemies. And the way I felt like God would tell me about enemies was so pure and more understanding that people wasn't my enemies. People who did me wrong wasn't my enemies. He he made me realize that I shared in one of my videos that how forgiveness is a weapon, and that forgiveness breaks that wall between you and a human enemy or anyone that trespasses on me, all right, or harm me or disrespect me. And it's a hard thing to do, but you know, as I grew stronger in his word and I started learning more and walking in Christ, living in Christ, being in Christ, I started realizing that people, human beings, is not our enemy. We're all children of God. And even though there's those that are believers or unbelievers, we are still God's creation. And we have a sinful heart that can astray us to lead to hurt one another or trespass on one another, right? But I got to learn that that person is not the enemy. It was a spiritual thing, you know. So as I started growing more and learning more and learning more of his wisdom from God, I started to understand that it wasn't it wasn't actually the person. It was the things that they do, or it was a spiritual thing behind it that that was the enemy. So as I grew and time went by, I always try to remember that. And I still struggle with times that, yeah, there's a lot of people I might dislike, don't agree with, but I never try to consider them as my enemy. I try never want to harm them. I mean, there can always be a situation where it comes to defending my life, and and I might want to hurt a person from defending myself from being hurt, or even sometime when a person trash talks me and or disrespect me. At that moment I feel like choking them out, or you know, having that carnal mindset where I want to put them down. But it would click back and always remind me that person's not, he don't become the enemy of what he did to me. I just disliked him for the moment, what he did, what he said, but he's not an enemy. Sometimes the enemy is within us, that I started learning the things that make me want to hurt somebody, these type of emotions or these type of feelings, you know, because the enemy is spiritual. The enemy is the wrong emotion that leads me to make bad habits. Even like I tell people in fitness, right? Yourself is your own enemy when it comes to either getting stronger or growing in fitness, right? In your journey, because procrastination is an enemy, being lazy is an enemy, certain food is your enemy. So like me, cookies and junk food can be my enemy. Sometimes they take over me. I have these cravings, and I look at cookies and I feel like they beat me down sometimes. Those are my enemies, you know, because they're my enemies in that part of my life. But sometimes I marinate with them and I enjoy and I dine with my enemies, which is the cookies, right? But that's that was the wisdom of the day that I wanted to share, is that, you know, defining your enemies. And sometimes people is not the enemy. It's things that make us, feelings or things that make us not genuine, or make us, how you say, not a respectable person, not being noble, or breaks our discipline, or kills our dreams. These are the things that should be our enemies, not the people, not a country, not what the media tells us. Like they would say, since North Korea or Cuba are communists, so those are America's enemies, right? even bad people, even criminals, because they're committing crime or they're doing this, that ain't our enemy. We just have to be careful around criminals. In my opinion, it's not my enemy, but I have to be aware, I have to be safe around them. But it's things that what they do, they don't know. So I just wanted to share that, knowing my enemies. I got to, it was a blessing to me that when I started to realize that people is not my enemy. People in the past that did me dirty is not my enemies. Even though sometime in our heart we can feel like, dude, I dislike that person, or we use that strong word, I hate that person. But we should never look at them as the enemy, because it's something that they don't know what they did or what they doing. And maybe they do, but it's a spiritual thing that takes over people. So, and there was a verse that I wanted to share. It goes in the Bible. It goes from Ephesians chapter 6, verse, where's that verse? Verse 12. It's a famous verse. A lot of Christians know this verse. It's the whole armor of God. For it says, chapter 6, verse 12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, meaning we don't wrestle with people. We don't fight with people. We don't go into war with people, but against principalities and against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in this heavenly place. So literally it's saying that our fight and our battles is spiritual. Those are our enemies, the things that breaks our identity of being a noble person. And in this Christian life, we have our identity is in Christ. So anything that goes against our belief or our walk in Christ is considered our enemy. And it's the same thing in other parts in life. When you're trying to succeed in something, right? Anything that hinders you from pursuing your success or your greatness, that could be your type of enemy. But anyone that blocks you or go against you in that path doesn't mean he's your enemy. It's a spiritual thing behind it, right? So that's what I wanted to share today. Wednesday wisdom, knowing who your enemy is, what is an enemy. And that was my opinion that I wanted to share, because growing up, I always was taught that you're going to have friends and you're going to have enemies. There's two type of people in this world, and I downgrade that belief, and I grew up to understand what is an enemy and who's my enemies. And I don't believe the people of children of God should be considered an enemy, because if God created that person like he created me, that's a family of us, right? We might not have the same belief, but we're all creation of God. And at the same time, that person has a mom and dad just like me, has a sibling just like me, right? We're all connected in one way. We all are blood related in one way, right? So I never want to believe that humans, any type of human, should be our enemy, even in the crucial way how things can be done. But that's God's wisdom of seeing things like that. So that was for Wednesday wisdom. Hope you liked this video that I shared. I want to continue to come out with more wisdom that I learned, that I apply daily in my life. And remember, I always try to walk in my wisdom, but I still stumble. I still get mad, but I never want to consider anyone or any person an enemy of mine. So I hope you like this video. Like, subscribe. If you got anything that I said, comment about it. See you on the next one.